Thanks, Kirsty. Hi, folks. My name is Brian Clark. I'm Senior Education Officer with Education Scotland, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about digital learning and teaching and some of the best practice that we've seen emerge over the past few months of being in lockdown. So, in the last lockdown, towards the end of the last lockdown, Kirsty and myself were really fortunate to be able to speak to lots of practitioners around about what was working for them and the results of those conversations, the general themes of those conversations, can be summarised on the bullet points on the screen that you see before you. And what was really positive to see is that there was an article published towards the end of last year, and the link's on the slide there to an Edutopia one, part of the 10 most significant education studies of 2020, and it's number 8 on the list. And a lot of the themes that we've seen were actually brought up in that particular paper. So the themes about essentially good learning and teaching, about providing clear explanations and scaffolding, incorporating interaction and feedback, and using games and simulations if you can, and having material and technological support to help pupils should they be having difficulty with any technical aspects or indeed with the content of the material you're trying to deliver. So those were the themes that were being brought up as in kind of good practice, and today hopefully we'll be able to cover how that might look in the RMPS classroom. Before we do move on to that though, not so long ago I also saw this diagram which is associated to a blog post by a person on Twitter with the handle teacherhead, and he wrote a blog post. It takes about 5 minutes to read, and it's a really well written blog post that might be worth having a look at around about what does learning and teaching online look like, how you plan for that, how do you know how well your students have engaged with the material, what to do next, evaluate, provide feedback, and then plan again. And that little diagram I thought was a really concise, good example of planning for delivering content online. And the associated blog post again is worth having a look at too. So I thought I want to flag that up. So to begin with, one of the things that became obvious to us as we were chatting to various practitioners is that in some subjects, I think RMPS would be one of those, is that it's likely to be a lot of text that students have to deal with on a daily basis, reading articles or whatever. And because it's likely that most of that is happening from some form of screen, then actually acknowledging how we can best support students to read from a screen is something that we thought we could help support. So in the first instance, there are a set of tools that your pupils may be able to use on their own devices to help remove the clutter from any pages on the web that they might be looking at. So for example, tools like Immersive Reader that's built into Office 365 or Text Help if you're a G Suite user would be worth having a look at. And there's also reader modes that are built into a lot of the main popular web browsers. So web browsers like Chrome or like Safari or Edge have got tools built into those browsers that strip away all adverts and unassociated images from any web pages and allow the user to see a clean version of that text. So it might be worth sharing this video, which is available on the DigiLearn Scott YouTube channel, with your learners to say, well, if I'm directing you towards a website like a BBC News article or whatever, then you can use the browser to strip away excess content to leave that clutter-free reading pane for your students to watch. So that video is on our YouTube channel and shows how to do that in three more popular browsers, so Chrome, iOS browsers, and Microsoft Edge. The other thing that was interesting to look at was if you consider how you might read from a screen, whether it be on a smartphone or on a tablet or even on a desktop class browser, quite often you might kind of hold your phone or hold your tablet and you'll keep your fingers on the screen and you'll be scrolling and reading at the same time. And when you do that, you're obviously moving the text around, which does make it more challenging to actually engage or read those texts. So one of the kind of biggest tips we could be saying to pupils is that when you are reading from a screen, take your fingers off the mouse, take your hands off the screen, position the text where you want it to go, and read what's on there and then move. So little strategies like that might help your learners engage with the text a little bit more. The other thing that was brought up by our English colleagues in Education Scotland is that there are reading strategies that are available to share with learners. In your local authority or your schools may have reading strategies in your English department or at local authority level that might be worth again sharing with your pupils. So when they are engaging with the text, you can maybe give them some prompts to consider how they might reflect or think about the text that they are reading. So that's just an example of some reading strategies that you may want to consider sharing. And finally, to kind of bring both those kind of contexts together, this video here that's available on YouTube, which will share the link as well, is about 6 minutes long, and this gentleman talks about kind of how we might read strategically from the screen, and talks about strategies such as slow scrolling and scanning, about making notes and summaries, and how you might visualise content as you read that text on the screen. So one of the first things that we'd be suggesting for subjects that do have a lot of text reading to do, that making sure that pupils understand there are tools available for them to declutter the screen, to give them strategies to how to effectively engage with that text, and then how that might pull both those things together to actually create an engaging experience for those pupils. Now, as well as that particular aspect of reading from the screen and those videos, there are a number of learning paths available that help support a number of different strategies that you might want to think about when delivering content online. And they're all available on the digilearn.scot website. So if you go to the DigiLearn Scot site, digilearn.scot, and click on Learning Paths, you'll see the first one that's there says Learning Online, and there's a number of bullet point lists which take you off to different articles that look at things like creating diagnostic questions, how you might create an effective video, active digital learning activities you might want to have a look at, what geocoding is, flipped learning, and those things are being added to all the time. So it's worth having a look at that particular section to look for particular strategies or ideas of how you might kind of develop your remote learning approaches, or indeed blended learning approaches. And when you click on the learning paths, they can come up and look like this. It gives you a little bit of an introduction to what each of those different elements are, and you can dive deeper by clicking Read More. But today, what I thought we would concentrate on was essentially, how do we make sure that the material that we're giving our pupils, they are engaging with as best they can, and they're learning from that, and the strategies that we can take as teachers to help kind of minimise the amount of content that we're giving those pupils and the expectation of, how much they're supposed to understand and remember from that content. So the cognitive theory of multimedia learning looks a bit like this, and essentially what it says is when you are viewing multimedia content like a video, that your brain is processing the words and it's processing the pictures through different channels and processing that through sensory memory and your working memory. But at the same time, it's trying to integrate all that new knowledge with any prior knowledge that you have on that subject. And that takes an awful lot of kind of brain processing and power. And when we kind of overload our learners, that new content can often become lost. So what I thought to do today is share just a few of the strategies of how we can reduce that cognitive load when we're delivering content in a digital format. So some of the principles to help reduce cognitive load, and again, the very straightforward principles that probably resonate with just, again, good learning and teaching. But here are four that I think are quite useful to keep in mind when you're developing content, whether it be video content or whether it be text-based content. So the first principle is coherence, and that essentially says, kind of any words and pictures and sounds that you're using, make sure that they're related to the subject you're trying to deliver. So don't worry too much about the inclusion of, you know, images for the sake of images, or or fancy transitions just to make your presentation look a little bit swisher, because that can actually detract from the sense you're trying to deliver within your presentation or video or whatever that might be. When it comes to video, we're probably all aware that engaging with a 40-minute video can be quite challenging for any of us. So when we're trying to deliver content using video as a vehicle, we should try and break down that video into shorter segments, into shorter chunks. And after each chunk, you may have a little bit of kind of formative assessment that kind of says, well, how much have we learned from that piece of video? So that could be done with a couple of reflective questions, with a couple of quizzes from a Microsoft Forms or Google Forms or whatever it might be. But the general feeling is that a good educational video should last between 5 and 15 minutes, and lots of the papers that have been written about educational videos kind of state times in that bracket. The most common number duration that I found when I was looking for this was 6 minutes per video. Now that might seem quite challenging to make a 6-minute video when you've got a lot of content to cover, but I think with if you sit between the 5 and 15 minutes range, you're probably in the right wheelhouse. The other thing is contiguity. So the contiguity principle just means that to try and reduce pupils visually scanning and moving their eyes around pages, trying to link together any images or graphs associated with some text, try and place the text or graph close to the text so you're not asking pupils to move their eyes around the screen. And finally, the signalling principle, which I'm sure we're all aware of, but we didn't know it was called signalling principle, but was to use arrows or numbers or labels or something to signify on screen or on paper where we want to draw our students' attention to. So that could be kind of like I've done here. I've got a little blue arrow pointing to signalling principle. There's some arrow bullets kind of pointing to numbers, arrows, labels, those types of things. I think being don't overly use them. You might want to think about, if you're recording a presentation, having at this point some transitions or animations that draw attention to a particular piece of content that appears. So that's when I would say that kind of fits under that signalling principle. But again, not to overdo any of those things. And I think if you're able to, when you're creating content for pupils to consume in an online environment, whether it be a video or whether it be on paper, if you can bear those things in mind and consider we're trying to make sure that our pupils aren't overloaded, then these could probably help with that. Now, the DigiLearn Scott YouTube channel has a number of playlists and videos all to do with delivering content online. So for example, you'll see that top row there. It's got things like adding templates to assignments or using rubrics or using quizzes. All of those videos show you how to use different aspects of digital technology, and within the context of whether it be assessment or assignments, or using file uploads, or indeed using the reader modes in various browsers. That's there for you to kind of have a look at, to say, well, okay, I'd like to know a little bit more about dual coding, or I'd like to be able to add a rubric to do better feedback or marking within my assignments. And those videos are all sitting there, and they all sit between kind of 5 and 10 minutes too. So hopefully they're kind of small enough for you to watch and not get cognitively overloaded, but also be able to take from that some things you can apply relatively quickly in your virtual learning environment. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that I know that in terms of senior phase, we'll all be thinking about quality assurance and learner evidence, and the DigiLearn Scott website has a blog post around about digital quality assurance of national qualifications, and it's about how you can potentially use Microsoft OneNote and Microsoft Teams to use that technology within a team to share and quality assure learner evidence. So that blog post is available to look at. It's got some videos about how you might set up your team, and it's got some videos about how you might contribute to the notebook with some learner evidence. It's also got a downloadable PDF, which looks like it's on the right there, that has just short descriptions of what each stage might look like and links off to various videos. So please take a bit of time to have a look at that blog post, and you might be able to use the information that's there to set up small quality assurance groups within your local authority or within a group of schools to share liner evidence and to have conversations around about the standards and if the pupils have met those. So that's a very brief overview, very quick overview. So a couple of things to take away is that the DigiLearn Scot website Learning Paths has got lots of information for you as a teacher, which you can look at about kind of remote learning and teaching ideas, digital learning ideas. There is the YouTube channel that has got instructional videos on various aspects of digital learning and teaching, and some of which you might want to share with your pupils or other members of the department. And finally, there's that blog post around about quality assuring content using Microsoft Teams and OneNote that you may want to again share with your colleagues or have a look at yourself. So at that point, I'm going to hand back to Kirsty.